planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
Listen to Anthology on 89.9 HD3 and let the music unlock your memories. All your favorite music from the 60s, 70s, and 80s are always on 89.9 HD3 Anthology.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
I'm Ann Schendler on today's First Coast Connect. It's demanding, often physically draining, but for many, caregiving can also be deeply rewarding. We talk to experts, caregivers, and you about how to respond and cope with the challenge. Then, a performance series celebrates 45 years of making culture affordable in the ancient city. We tell you what the Emma Concert Series has on tap. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us on Facebook, Instagram, or X at FCC On Air. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Kristen Wright. California Governor Gavin Newsom is holding a press conference today to announce his plan to counter Republican efforts in Texas to draw new congressional maps in an attempt to gain more U.S. House seats. Newsom says President Trump is trying to rig Texas districts. Newsom has plans to call a special election for a House map ballot measure. Meanwhile, Texas Governor Greg Abbott is calling a new special session. The Texas Newsroom's Blaise Gainey reports the agenda still includes redrawing the state's congressional map.
House Democrats remain out of state to block the redistricting bill, which could add 5 more Republican seats to Congress. Speaking in Chicago, House Democratic Caucus Chair Representative Gene Wu of Houston said they expect new maps would eventually become law, but wanted to be sure that other Democratic-led states were ready to fight back.
Texas is determined to do this. If other red states are determined to do this, then we will have other states who will make sure that it does not matter what they do, that we will nullify their actions.
Several Democratic-led states across the country have said that they too will redraw their congressional maps. For NPR News, I'm Blaise Gainey.
Republican-led states are activating the National Guard to tackle illegal immigration. Jenna McMurtry reports from Wyoming.
Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon says he's deploying 15 National Guard members to help Immigration and Customs Enforcement with paperwork and migrant transportation within the month. The governor says the Guard will remain in state and under his control, and that they will not have access to ICE databases or the training to make arrests.
Wyoming has been firm and consistent in our commitment to helping secure the border.
19 other GOP governors have pledged to also activate the resources of the National Guard to assist in the Trump administration's crackdown on immigration. For NPR News, I'm Jenna McMurtry in Jackson, Wyoming.
President Trump says he will host this year's Kennedy Center Honors Awards show in December. He named himself chairman of the Board of Trustees in February and replaced its members. NPR's Elizabeth Blair says the president is defending his decision to play an active role in the Performing Arts Center during his second term.
Over the years, the Kennedy Center has tried to keep politics out of its programming and the honors event. That's one of the reasons there was traditionally a bipartisan board. Trump did not attend the honors during his first presidential term. At the press conference, this is what he said about getting so involved this year.
I shouldn't make this political because they made the Academy Awards political and they went down the tubes. So they'll say, Trump made it political, but I think if we make it our kind of political, we'll go up.
The honorees are singer Gloria Gaynor, country artist George Strait, actor Sylvester Stallone, Broadway actor and singer Michael Crawford, and the rock band Kiss. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It is 9:04. A 30-year-old man's dead following an officer shooting early yesterday on Buckman Street in Jacksonville's Talleyrand area. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office says the man who was carrying a knife had tried to set fire to a house on East 16th Street, but he fled from authorities twice. Chief Alan Parker says an officer finally caught up with him and told the suspect to stop.
And as he gets out, he comes around with the taser to engage him. And as he comes out, the suspect threatens him, pushes the knife out toward him twice, saying, "Get back, get back." So the officer engages, lets go of his taser, drops it in the street, and shoots him with his pistol.
The 30-year-old man died at the scene. This is the 13th officer shooting of the year in Jacksonville versus 8 for all of last year. Florida smoke shops carrying a concentrated kratom compound known as 7-O were told to stop selling it immediately. State Attorney General James Uthmeyer issued an emergency ban Wednesday, calling it a danger to public health and safety. 7-O comes in drinks, gummies, and powders. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration is taking steps to add the compound to the federal schedule of dangerous drugs. It's going to be another hot afternoon here in Jacksonville and Northeast Florida. A heat advisory is in place for Northeast Florida and Southeast Georgia from 11 this morning until 7 this evening for temperatures that'll feel up to 112 degrees. Some scattered showers could develop this afternoon and drift towards the I-95 corridor to help cool us down. Overnight lows will drop down into the mid to upper 70s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Cy Sims Foundation. Since 1985, supporting advances in science, education, and the arts towards a fairer, more just, and civil society. More information is available at cysimsfoundation.org.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, disease, dementia, disability, all can create sudden demand for a dedicated caregiver. Today, we're talking to 4 experts and caregivers about a job that's both a labor of love and often an unbearable burden. Later in the program, the Emma Concert Series unveils its 47th season. We'll tell you what's on the schedule from rock tributes to a Shakespeare-inspired ballet. But first, as Rosalind Carter famously said about caregiving, paraphrasing here, in a lifetime, everyone has been, is currently, will be, or will need a caregiver. And yet it's a role that usually arrives with no training and little support. Here to talk about the work and the rewards of caregiving, I am joined by Dr. Joe Sirven, Mayo neurologist and host of the WJCT program and podcast, What's Health Got to Do with It? Good morning, Dr. Joe.
Good morning, Ann.
Love having you back. We are also joined by Susan Ponder-Stansel. She's president and CEO of Alivia Care. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. We're also joined by Linda Levin. She's a caregiver and the CEO of ElderSource. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning. Glad to be back.
And Alexandra Mackey. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Mackey. Okay,
Yes.
Apologize for that. Caregiver and nurse supervisor at Her Heart Assisted Living Facilities. Good morning, Alexandra.
Good morning, Ann. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Joe, caregiving is the subject of a workshop at WJCT here this weekend, and we're going to talk about that. But if it's okay, I'd sort of like to start with your personal story.
Sure.
In addition to being a neurologist, you've had several family members that have required some extensive caregiving. How did all that begin?
I'm not going to tell you my age, but it started when I was a teenager. That's how I grew up with my grandmother, helping. There's 6 siblings, and my grandmother was someone that we needed to care for towards the end of her life. And that actually set the whole path because ended up being the translator between her and her physicians as a teenager, because I was the one. I don't know how I got hired to do that in the family, but nonetheless, that's how it turned out. Fast forward, we did it 4 more times. Both my parents, both my wife's parents. We've had every variation, different states. I feel that my entire life has been enveloped in some way, shape, or another in the world of caregiving at home and the different varieties that can look like.
And as a teenager, I mean, that first caregiving experience arrived sort of with some unexpected kind of realizations. I mean, you were sort of like doing your homework one night, weren't
Right.
you? When you kind of
That's what I was like. I forget, 16 or 17 years old. I'm on the phone with a friend, and I hear sirens. I ask him, what's going on at your house? It goes, because I hear police sirens. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I look out the window, they're in front of my house, and my grandmother wandering with a walker, and she is like yelling at a police officer in a cul-de-sac, and I'm like, I think I gotta go. And basically she was just confused. She's yelling at him in Spanish, assassin, assassin. And I was supposed to be the one watching at that time, but that's the type of thing that I remember putting us on a very interesting path of just the issues and situations that you would never think that you'd find yourself in as a result.
Has that experience shaped sort of you professionally?
Completely. In fact, I remember when she got admitted to the hospital for one of those things when I had to serve as the interpreter because she only spoke Spanish. And it was me in front. And I think it just set me on the pathway to medicine, to be honest with you.
Susan, caregiving is one of the fastest growing healthcare demands in the United States. In 5 years, every single baby boomer is going to be over 65, and the number of Americans that are needing long-term care is expected to double. Are we prepared for that increase?
No, absolutely not. And one of the things that I always like to just talk about is the fact that our healthcare system, and I would put that in air quotes if I were, had a video feed going, is not really a system. It's actually most of the care, and the estimates are about 80% of the care that people receive in this country is provided by unpaid caregivers, whether they're related by blood or whether they're neighbors or friends. So I think that it's something that's been hiding in plain sight. I like to say that on any given day in Florida, we probably have, a couple of million single family nursing homes, but it's just not visible. And I think what you mentioned with the statistic is that it's now reaching critical mass. The other thing that I think about too is that the estimates are about 4 million family members are caring for children with a major illness and disability. So older adults, but there are a lot of caregivers among us, and we're not prepared to really help them.
Sure. I mean, the scope of caregiving, Alexandra, is enormous, and you do that in your professional work, and you also do it at home. You have a daughter that has a disability.
Yes, she is 15 years old, but functions maybe at a 7-year-old level. She does need some help with her activities of daily living and just making sure that she gets what she needs before I go to work, and then after I come home from work, after taking care of other people. So yeah, I can understand completely when someone gets thrown into this, situation where all of a sudden they're taking care of mom and dad, and it could happen overnight.
What do you think people most often misunderstand about the job of a caregiver, whether it's for a child or an adult, as you do, with your nursing facilities?
A lot of the families think that there's more help out there than there actually is. And so they're thrown for a loop. They don't know where to go, what to do. So getting the information out there, I think it would be very important for us, to focus on as a community.
Yeah, I mean, the job can be enormous, but that realization that you're sort of going it alone can be devastating for people.
Absolutely. There's nothing better than working into the assisted living facility and seeing a family who, when you first meet them, are in tears and just beside themselves, not knowing what to do. And if they make the decision to let us take care and become part of their family and part of their support system, seeing in this couple of weeks them just de-escalate and realize, oh, wow, I can be a daughter again, I can be a husband again, and we take that load off of them. And I just am blessed to see that happen and be able to be part of it.
Yeah. Linda Levin, this weekend's discussion is a continuation of a series of similar discussions that have been happening here at the WJCT, kind of in the Lunch and Learn Forum. This series has been really important to a lot of people in this community. I was telling you before the show, I just heard from a woman yesterday who's moving into the caregiving world herself and has been at every one of these. And for people who haven't been able to attend, they're actually recorded, which is great. And we'll talk a little bit more about where people can find those recordings. But why do you think this series has been so well attended? Why there's been so much community interest?
Well, first, I just think it's fantastic what PBS has been doing, airing Bradley Cooper's documentary, Caregiving, and really raising the awareness nationally, and our own WJCT taking that to another level locally with us doing these lunch and learns and Saturdays event. And I think what that has done is raise awareness. So often, we don't think of ourselves as the label caregiver. We're daughter, wife, mother, sister, neighbor, and we don't think of the word caregiver. That's really an industry term that's starting to get adopted. And knowing that there is this group of people like them out there in the community who are also having challenges, who are also stressed, who are also struggling, and to find out that there are some resources that can be helpful, even to each other. There are resources to each other. I think this has really spoken. It has really resonated with so many people, knowing that I am daughter, but I am caregiver. And so is, so is this gentleman and this young lady and this young lady. We're all in this, and there's so much that we can learn to help us. And here's this wonderful opportunity to start on that journey of getting that kind of information.
And that feeling that there are other people in the same situation can really help, because caregiving, because of the demands, because it often requires you to be in a certain place like the home for days, or long hours, it can be really isolating.
It's very isolating. And, isolation is really deadly. I mean, it's not healthy to be isolated, and it makes you feel more and more alone. And so caregiving, people will lose their identity and lose what other parts of their lives they may have had, other engagement opportunities that they had with friends and socialization, and really become solely the caregiver. And it's not good for either the person they're caring for or themselves as the caregiver. And this really, these series really, parts of it have really spoken to that, to let the caregiver know we have to take care of ourselves. And I say ourselves because I'm one of those. And I have to stop and take care of myself, working caregiver. And so the series talks about that. It's put on the oxygen mask first. It's you can't pour water from an empty cup. All those expressions are very real. And so there's some of that information in this series as well, which is great.
If you're just joining us, we are talking about responding to and coping with the challenges of caregiving with 4 caregivers and experts. If you have a question, or if you're a caregiver and have a story that you'd like to share, we would welcome it. You can call us and join the conversation on air at 904-549-2937. You can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can tag us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or X at FCC On Air. Linda, you mentioned this PBS campaign, the caregiving campaign, which is in some ways anchored around this really powerful documentary. We've got a link to that Bradley Cooper produced documentary on our website, and people can watch it for free. It is a very beautiful story, and it tells the story of several caregivers. Let's take a listen to one of them.
Okay, so basically, it's based on how many days you have left, and if you're not dead by that time, then you got to come off.
Correct.
Now say that back to yourself and tell me how that sounds. I was told that because he's been on hospice a year and a half and he hasn't died, he doesn't qualify for a humane way to leave this world, a way that doesn't kill the caregiver.
Susan, I want to ask you about that. So at the beginning there, she's obviously talking to somebody that is, handling the financial aspect. Her husband has been in hospice. He's going to be taken out of hospice because they've decided he's doing too well, which is a reality of hospice. That is how it works from a funding standpoint. But so it means that this woman who has been providing this care for her neurodegeneratively, damaged husband is now going to lose the things that she's been counting on, which includes some financial elements, products that she's able to get, incontinence supplies, things that can be very expensive, but she's also going to lose the care that she was getting, the aid that she was getting. How do you talk to people who are experiencing that? How do you talk to clients that are facing that reality when they're in hospice or palliative care?
Yeah, it's never a good or easy conversation. And I think it's important to think about hospice care or the hospice Medicare benefit is really the way that we deliver end of life care in this country. And it hasn't changed much since 1983. It's based on the assumption you'll have a caregiver in the home. So again, we have that framework built into the actual Medicare benefit for hospice. And the pilot study was done with elderly cancer patients. And cancer has a very different sort of track than some of the diseases we see now. So I started in 1985 as a social worker. Medicare had only been paying a couple of years for hospice care. At that time, 95% of our caseload had advanced cancer. Today, about 30 to 28% of our caseload has advanced cancer, and the rest of the patients in our care have illnesses and conditions that don't have a predictable prognosis. So, for instance, the neurodegenerative, congestive heart failure, end-stage congestive, COPD, things like that, that really chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or emphysema. So one of the things I get to work on a national level as an advocate with those Centers for Medicare Services and Congress who have some power over all of this and say, can we modernize the benefit and understand that if someone doesn't need the hospice piece of it, are there other types of care like palliative care, like serious illness support? There are some pilots going on to help, but right now, if you're not terminally ill and there are very specific criteria, then you sign out of hospice. But the idea is you can always come back if your illness progresses. So that's by way of saying, Anne, that I think there's a gap, but it's not because hospice providers don't want to be there. It's just when you look in our system, if you have a serious illness, where else do you really go to get that continuity of care and anyone helping you navigate the system? So it's hospice by default, but it wasn't necessarily built from a regulatory standpoint to meet the needs we have right now.
I want to take a call from Roselle in Avondale. Good morning, Roselle. Go ahead.
Good morning, Anne. Thanks for this program. Obviously, it's been hugely popular for obvious reasons. But I always joke and say I left skid marks out of Providence, Rhode Island, to come here to take care of my mother. I'm the youngest of 7. And, everybody was really too busy and had more money and didn't want to change any of their lifestyle. So I moved down here and, the hardest thing I think to hear from friends and everybody was, "Oh, you're so good. You're so good to take care of your mom." And it really would, cause me a lot of shame and embarrassment and, self-reflection, which was good because, it wasn't always, I wasn't always good. I wasn't always pleasant. I wasn't always kind and patient. And, so it really depends on who you bring into the room, in the morning and, who I brought in to greet my mom. And so we had a fantastic relationship up to the very end. And I was fortunate she had no dementia or decline in that respect. I was able to hire somebody that admitted to me she was single and pregnant. And I said, "You're hired right away." Because I had been hired as a nanny when I was single and pregnant in Providence. And I had that job for 4 years. But the other thing is, I have a problem with a lot of the agency work. And it's underpaid. These people, I think we all know the agency gets 30 and then the person that sits with your loved one gets 15 or 12 or whatever. And it's unfortunate. That's the way it works.
Yeah, Roselle, thank you. I'm sorry I'm cutting you there a little bit, Roselle. I appreciate you calling and your thoughts. I want to ask you about that, Alexandra, because there is this tendency, I think, for people to put caregivers on a pedestal and to sort of, give them praise. And to Roselle's point, it is a hard job. You're not always an angel at the bedside. You are still sometimes the daughter or the sister or the mother that is, going to disagree with the person that you're caring for, or perhaps have, frustrations.
Yes. That's where I am fortunate to work where I do work, because we are able to step in for each other when we have a moment where we feel like we're going to, lose our patience or something like that, because you're dealing with a human being who have real frustrations, even though sometimes it's not rooted in our reality, it's their reality. And it can get very, very tough. And for those caregivers at home, they may not have that. And sometimes they are praised, and sometimes in the family, they're the scapegoats. And that's very tough. They get alienated from their own families because they're not doing it the way that they think it should be, done.
Yeah.
So that's another symptom that can happen when someone's caring for a loved one of the family.
We got an email from Mark. He says, "Thanks for this topic. I learned that my dad's assisted living monthly cost is $16,000. He's in the Midwest and I'm in Florida. Is assisted care less expensive here, or should I get another house down here and have him move in with me so I can look after him?" So cost is an enormous part of this, Linda, as you well know, and as the people that you work with have experienced. Some of these programs are actually designed to sort of drain away your finances before they start kicking in payments. So, the way that some of this long-term care reimbursement is structured through Medicaid is essentially, if you have money, you have to pay it all until you can pay no more, and then they'll start covering the care.
Yes, of the person, not so that person's income, not the family's income.
Sure, but
the spouse doesn't have to go broke. The family doesn't have to go broke. But yes, the point is, it is a government-funded program, Medicaid, and so they do want beneficiaries to spend down their own personal funds before tapping into the government funds. But that care is very expensive, and that is a very hard thing for people to do who have not already been on Medicaid, to spend down. It's frightening. It's unnerving. They also don't necessarily understand how to protect their resources, how to protect their assets, and so that they don't have to lose everything. So there's assistance available. We had an elder law attorney from Jacksonville Area Legal Aid from St. John's speak as part of the program. You want to talk to one of those folks, an elder law attorney, to get some good advice on how to protect your assets and your income, and also to know what's legal and what's not legal. If you heard Megan speak, she's like, and that's not legal. People don't know that. And so
this was the lawyer that spoke at the event. Yeah.
And people just go along because they don't know, and they're trusting the facility or whoever. There's a movement nationally to address the issue of underpaid care workers. Unfortunately, in this country, those that take care of our most vulnerable, our young children and our frail older adults, are some of the worst paid professions. And it's some of the hardest work when you think of the work they have to do. And so there is a workforce shortage. And with that shortage, because they're leaving the workforce, they're finding better paying jobs, that is also contributing to the growing demand placed on family caregivers, and family being friends and neighbors as well, because we're seeing that workforce shortage. And so there is this national movement to try to address that as well.
I do want to mention, we talked about the fact that these previous caregiving sessions that were held here were recorded. This weekend's one will be recorded too. But if you either want to RSVP to this weekend's caregiving event, or you want to watch the other ones that have preceded, you can go to wjct.org/caregiving. You can either RSVP there or get the link to the upcoming segment, and then you can also find the earlier recordings. Susan, I want to ask you about the financial aspect, because I know that that's something that you've been deeply involved in your career, particularly, how that can create vulnerabilities for the caregiver. We're talking a little bit about how it can drain the existing finances of someone who needs care and who may not be prepared for just how expensive it is on a monthly basis. But what about the people who are maybe having to leave the workforce to care for someone?
Yes, that's a really important issue, Anne, and it's not necessarily visible. Older women disproportionately experience poverty as they age if they had to step away and be caregivers, and whether it's right or not, statistically, caregiving in the United States disproportionately does fall to women. They are the vast majority of caregivers, and that's not, please, no shade toward men. I'm just saying that, the way it is right now. And what you find often is that these caregivers have to either reduce their hours or, as Dr. Joe was mentioning, if you're what I call a serial caregiver, where you're raising your children, then you're caring for your parents, then your spouse or partner needs care. You may spend 4 decades providing care and you're not accumulating Social Security benefits. You're not able to do any retirement planning. And so I think it's an issue that not only the cost of care and really, considering that Medicare doesn't pay for assisted living, which is what I believe your email person was talking about. Everyone assumes there's some financial help, and there's usually not. But caregiving then is one of those things that can cause the caregiver to experience real financial problems as they age because it is an unpaid job.
And, there are sometimes stipends available for people who are providing, care in some situations. But, as we're looking towards the legislation that was recently approved, we're looking at, $1 trillion worth of cuts over the next 10 years to Medicare and Medicaid. I'm guessing that what benefits are available, whether it's any kind of reimbursement or, care or any coverage of long-term care, that those programs are going to be impacted or eliminated.
They very well could be, and I think those are where some of the hard decisions will take place. But you mentioned stipends. The Veterans Administration has what's called aid and attendance. If you're a family member providing care, but one of the things that is difficult in this country that makes no sense to me is that if you need a nursing home placement, then you can qualify for Medicaid, but that is the most expensive, most restrictive level of care. And we have concerns about paying for someone to stay with you in your home, a family member who has to leave the workforce. There's concerns about fraud. There's concerns about how we would actually know what was being paid for. But economically and from an outcomes standpoint, that would be preferable. So at some point, we're just going to have to figure out how to do this because we can't build enough long-term care beds for what's coming. And again, why do we make people go into institutional care because our payment system only pays for that? It makes no sense to me.
If you're just joining us, we were talking about caregiving ahead of a day-long event here at WJCT on Saturday, looking at supports and resources available, as well as a number of speakers who are expert in the field. You can join our conversation at 904-549-2937, or you can email First Coast Connect at wjct.org. We've got a call from Daryl in St. Augustine. Good morning, Daryl. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, Sam. Good morning, Ann. This is just so incredibly sad and unnecessary. This is not the way it works in virtually every other country in the world. They understand that the citizens spend their life contributing to our society and our government through their taxes and through their work. To basically drain all their assets at the end is only in America can we find some way to profit from the sick and the ill. I don't understand why that happens that way. My mother just passed away in Canada. My brother was there, and she was taken care of right to the end, and it didn't take everything out of her. And I just find it absolutely disgusting that we have found some way to profit from the sick, even in their last moments.
Thanks, Daryl. I appreciate that. Alexandra, I want to ask you about the labor situation because you're talking about, some cuts that we may see going forward. We know that there have been some very restrictive immigration policies that have been
Yes.
impacting the workforce. Can you explain, what the concern there is? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of immigrant labor in the healthcare field.
Yes, and we have wonderful people who work for us who are immigrants that we're going to be impacted, and these are people who really give their all to our residents, and it's going to impact us a lot, and we are helping as much as we can, not only to have them stay with us, but also for them to continue their life that they've known for many, many years. It's very sad to see that this is happening. So there is going to be a shortage at our facility if this happens. But the other thing is we really have to take care of those caregivers. And I fortunately work for someone, my brother, who's our administrator. He understands the need for really taking care of our caregivers because that trickles down to our residents. And yeah, it's sad that that's going to happen down the road if it continues.
I also want to ask you about the rewards of caregiving because we're talking about a lot of the negatives, and there can be an enormous burden. It can be a huge financial burden. But there is something about providing care that can be its own reward, much in the same way that having a baby and caring for that infant can be very rewarding and really kind of life-changing for parents.
I have learned so much from my residents, my World War II residents, and just getting my hugs in as much as I'm giving hugs. I have a bunch of grandmas and grandpas now. So it's been very rewarding, and getting to work with their families as well and see them, like I said before, return to being daughter, mother, sister, husband, or wife. But yeah, it's very rewarding in seeing that and being a part of that. And my caregivers are wonderful to recognize that too.
Yeah. Joe, I know that you've done a series on your What's Health Got to Do with It show, talking to people who've been, frontline caregivers. And, no two stories are the same. They're all different. But in your own personal experience and the stories that you've heard, what do you hear in terms of rewards that people are able to glean from this experience?
I think on the reward side of it, what I hear almost uniformly is that, at least on the stories that I've had on the show, and even personally, it gives you this moment to kind of understand better that person. You spend a lot of time and you get to hear their stories that you never heard because you were just too busy in school, work. And here you get to know their past and fill in the blanks of things you just didn't know during their life. And that seems to be something that I did not anticipate from the journeys that I've heard on our show, and even personally, just filling in those details that there was never any time for when life was easier, if you will, during that time. And I think that's what I really have picked up from those stories.
Yeah, Linda, I'm curious. I mean, you've been a caregiver. I see you're getting a little emotional. What does it make you think of?
My dad. So, I was blessed to be his caregiver with my mom, who I am still very much involved in her life and supporting her. The things I had to do as a daughter that my parents, never thought, oh, you should never have to do this as a daughter. I'm like, but I am your daughter, and I love you. And we had special, precious moments and wonderful memories that are mine and mine alone. And I think it's important for caregivers to remember to be present, to be in the moment, and to allow yourself to feel and to remember to cherish those memories as hard as they are. So, sorry.
No, I thank you for sharing that. I mean, thank you for sharing that. Susan, what has your own experience been like on that front?
Yeah, I'm listening to Linda and Joe, and caregiving has been a gift. It's been traumatic at times because, as Linda mentioned, there are some things you see your parents going through that you wish they weren't going through, and you realize you can't fix it. But what I learned is that by being there, your presence is comforting. You can't fix it ultimately, but you make it better. And I think what I've learned is the resilience of the human spirit, and that at some point in our lives, what we can really relate to, regardless of whether this was your dad and you're his daughter, this was your mom and you're the son, is that we all have some basic human needs and things in common. And you can connect on that level. And as you mentioned, Joe, get to know the people you're caring for in a way that when we were all in our appropriate roles, perhaps there wasn't time or it wasn't comfortable. So for me, it continues to be a challenge because, again, my mom was at home for as long as my sister and I could keep her there, and then had to go to a long-term care facility because of her needs in the home just being too much to meet, without the ability to bring in two caregivers 24 hours a day, which is financially impossible for most people in this country.
Yeah. And Alexandra, I mean, you talked about families, when they're able to move their loved one into a care facility like yours, that does free up some opportunities for them to sort of reclaim a little bit of their traditional role, perhaps, pre-caregiver life. Are there stories that stick with you particularly about people who have either in your own experience as a caregiver or at home or in your professional world?
Just recently, in the past few months, we had this family who had a mom and dad who are both diagnosed with dementia, and they were living alone. So the family members had taken turns coming to the household, and especially if the cops were called because mom got out, and the neighbors alerted the authorities and everything like that, and they just got to a point where they just couldn't do it. They needed 24/7 care, and the daughter was very beside herself. She wanted to do more, so she did take her father in because he was more manageable, but the mom had to come be with us and be part of our family. And she had just a level of guilt. And she just, as she was moving her in that day, she came in a few times and just couldn't get past the feeling like she was abandoning her mother. But to see her come from that and really feel like we've become part of her mom's family. And, this lady happens to look like my mother-in-law, who I love dearly, and she has a special place in my heart. And she's blossomed. The daughter's blossomed. The family are so thankful, and it's just been rewarding to be a part of that.
We've got a call from Dylan in Avondale. Good morning, Dylan. Go ahead.
Good morning. This is very poignant and really useful. My own caregiving story is a little bit different. I care for my wife who has stage 4 cancer, and she's at MD Anderson. One of the things I think is missing in our community is support for caregivers, and then also for children that are going through that. My daughter's 12, and she's had to see some things that are very hard. I caught this at the end, but I'd be very interested if there are resources. I've been navigating this myself. I have the lucky enough to be in a financial position where I can. It'd be unimaginably hard if I didn't have this financial position, but there's a giant gap between, hey, your spouse has a terminal illness, and how to be able to manage not so much the physical comfort that I can manage, but the psychological constraints for both my daughter and myself and my wife. There's a huge gap between the medical infrastructure and then also the psychological infrastructure. There's some services there, but it seems very weak. There's not nearly enough. I find Facebook more helpful than the support groups that are available in the local community.
Dylan, I'm so sorry to hear about your wife and your daughter in this situation. Susan, I want to ask, I mean, I know that sometimes a palliative care hospice offers, chaplains that don't necessarily represent for any particular faith. They can be helpful, but what kind of services do you recommend for someone like Dylan, especially for his daughter, who's going through this terrible time?
Absolutely. Well, we at Community Hospice and Alivia Care, we don't only have the hospice program, but we have what is called palliative care, serious illness care for people who perhaps are still pursuing curative treatment, but the outcome may be that the curative treatment does not ultimately result in a remission of the illness. And for children especially, they will feel very different. They will feel odd because they're having to, perhaps potentially see their parent die or be so very ill. One of the things that we're fortunate enough to have is what's called a child life therapist. I think we actually have 5 of them the last time I counted and this is through charitable donations. And what these child life therapists do is help children process some of those emotions. They do memory making so that if the person passes away, there are things that are still going to connect them to their loved one. And then we have children's grief camps. We have a whole host of services to really help those who are experiencing it. But as to what Dylan said, one of the things that we're very interested in doing is more work in the community to help those young people who are coping, because many of those, as Joe mentioned, are becoming caregivers or seeing significant people in their lives with terminal or very serious illness. So I think there's lots more opportunity to do more, to give people the tools and the support they need to work through it and to come out of it without being traumatized.
Linda, I want to ask you a little bit about just a ready reference for some resources. One, we touched about, sometimes family members with dementia who will wander off, and I want you to sort of address the pre-registry program that you've been involved in for elder adults, but then also, what can people like Dylan do? Are there services available for him or his daughter that you could recommend?
Yeah, so I'm so glad that you asked about revamp. And so ElderSource did sponsor a dog for the JSO that will search for missing persons. And we have sent kits, as so does JSO, have sent kits to capture an individual's unique scent and preserve it for like 10 years if you do it right. And you register through JSO, so this is in Jacksonville, with their revamp program. So that if you're a person, whether it's someone with dementia who has a tendency to wander, or a young person with intellectual developmental disabilities who also may wander, like with autism, they tend to want to go near water. You have that scent kit ready to go. You call JSO, they come out with the scent dog, capture the scent. They have the information on revamp as well, which has additional information about the person, where they like to go, what do they like to do. So they have an idea, and it can much more quickly find that person and save lives. So to get that kit or to register, they can, of course, go to JSO, but they can also call our helpline. And we have kits at our office. We will have kits at the event on Saturday as well, so with instructions on how to capture the scent. Other resources, first of all, I think going to wjct.org/caregiver, all the resources we're talking about are going to be there for people, but also at myeldersource.org, we have specialized resources for caregivers, including our T-Care program, which is really focused on the caregiver and looking at what are their needs and helping them to find those resources specific to them to help them.
All right. We have so many calls, and I apologize that we're not going to be able to get to them today. We have questions about death doulas. We have questions about resources and financial support for people who are caregivers, but we're going to have to leave it there. The Caregiver Journey Workshop is Saturday, August 16th. That's a Saturday at 9 a.m. here at WJCT Studios. You can go to wjct.org/caregiving for more information. Dr. Joe Sirven, Susan Ponder-Stansel, Linda Levin, and Alexandra Carpenter, thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, a concert series celebrating 47 years of making culture affordable in the ancient city.
Congaree and Pen, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpen.com. The Covering Florida Navigator Program, providing confidential assistance with health insurance enrollment through the health insurance marketplace. Individuals and families are assisted with finding coverage at 877-813-9115 or at coveringflorida.org.
I'm David McGowan, CEO of WJCT Public Media. Recently, the federal government and the state of Florida ended their support for public media. For WJCT, that means $2 million has been erased from our annual budget. To replace those funds, we need to nearly double the support we receive from this community, from longtime supporters and from those who've never given before. That might sound impossible, but here's the truth. If every one of you who supports WJCT today reaches out to just one friend, one family member, one neighbor, and invites them to join us, we can get there. So whether you've supported us in the past or not, I'm asking you now to consider becoming a sustaining supporter of WJCT, because everything we do depends on it. Make your gift now at wjct.org/sustain. That's wjct.org/sustain. Thank you.
President Trump has taken over Washington, D.C.'s police force and deployed the National Guard in the nation's capital. He says he might do the same in places like Los Angeles, Chicago, and Baltimore, all in the name of public safety. Yet crime rates in cities around the country are at their lowest point in decades. What it all means for our nation's capital and beyond. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. St. Augustine's signature Emma concert series rolls out its 47th season lineup with an eclectic mix of music and dance, from 70s rock to a Shakespeare-themed ballet. Here to tell us about it is Renee Unsworth. She is the Emma Concert Series Association board member and founder of TotallyStAugustine.com. Good morning, Renee. Got it out there.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming up for this. So, 47th season.
47 years of great music and dance.
It is a well-honored series in St. Augustine. I'm curious kind of this year if there's anything particularly new in the range of performances, and how do you choose who's coming to town?
Right. We do have a great programming committee, and sometimes they bring back groups that have been enjoyed years, and then sometimes they try to find something new. And so there is some new dance groups this year that we're excited about. A little more modern. A lot of time it's classical music, but this time it's a great mix of classical, popular, and dance.
And so who is the audience for this? Who are your
It's
regulars? Are they tourists? Are they locals?
It is a mix of both. Visitors, locals. We do have a great season ticket holders that like to sit in the same seat every year and see the shows. And we have great ticket prices for students and children, $5. So parents who want to introduce their children to music and dance can do that affordably.
We'll talk a little bit about that, because the affordability element has always been kind of a foundational belief of the Emma Concert Series. Talk about how you're able to make it affordable. How do you finance it? Is it just ticket sales? And why is affordability so important to the concept of Emma?
Yes. Well, affordability is always important. We want everyone to be able to enjoy music. And the way they do that is sponsors. There are amazing community sponsors who contribute every year to Emma. And Emma also does give back. They give music scholarships to Flagler College students each year and other college students who are majoring in music. So they encourage that.
They also, don't they provide some instruments as well for
They
kids who
do.
are like learning how to play?
Yes, the Jack Page Project is one of their programs, and people contribute to that. And any teacher in St. Johns County can apply for this grant to receive instruments, musical, whatever they might need for their classroom.
I know that I think it was last year, they had they hosted an emergency performance of the symphony orchestra in Jacksonville because there was sort of a confusion about the facility availability. But they also are going to have the symphony this year as well.
Of course.
And this one is not necessarily classical music as we think about it, but it's going to be the music of John Williams. Can you tell us who he is and why people will probably know his sound?
Famous composer, Star Wars, and many other movies.
Jaws.
Jaws. I
Yeah.
mean, so many musical scores from movies
Mhm.
that people will recognize. And so, of course, they're bringing the Jack Symphony back. Such a important, musical legacy
Yeah.
that this orchestra has in our community. And they came in last year after another international orchestra actually had to cancel.
Okay.
They could not make their trip, and we were so thankful that the Jack Symphony could come in last minute and
Oh,
play
they were
in St.
having
Augustine.
visa problems. Is
Yes,
that right?
they
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I guess that's the wave of the future. So the symphony is not until March 8th, but the very first performance is in October. This is an a cappella group from Orlando.
Yes,
Called
Voctave.
Voctave. Okay.
They tour nationally and internationally, and they're doing a really fun program called On the Corner of Broadway and Main Street. So it's popular songs from different movies, different Broadway shows. So it's something for all ages, and everyone will recognize the music that they will be performing.
And the other shows that are, part of the lineup, there is a Shakespeare-based ballet,
Yes.
which sounds super cool. These are all staged at Lewis Auditorium at Flagler College. Is that right?
Flagler College is Emma's partner.
Okay.
So they provide this beautiful venue that everyone can come in downtown St. Augustine and enjoy. And I want to mention that tickets include free parking off-site. So you can go park for free off-site, hop on a little trolley that takes you to and from the venue.
Yeah, it's hugely convenient,
It really
especially
is.
when you're dealing with downtown St. Augustine parking.
The
So
traffic's not always great downtown,
It is
and there's
not.
not enough parking spaces. However, the Council on Aging provides their lot to Emma, and they have great little trolleys that go back and forth and take people to the venue.
Where can people get ticket information?
EmmaConcerts.com.
All right. Well, it is nice to have you here, Renee Unsworth. Thanks so much for being here and telling us about it.
Thank you so much.
All right. And thank you for listening. That's our program. If you have comments or suggestions, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast tonight at 8 o'clock on WJCT, or you can find our entire archive on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our executive producer is David Luckin. Our show is produced by Stacey Bennett and directed by Brady Coram. Our intern is Camille Crawford. It's her last day. Goodbye, Camille. And our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. The Florida Theater presents The Psychology of Cults, a live event exploring how cults form, why people join, and what it takes to leave. Wednesday, October 8th at 8 p.m. Information at floridatheater.com.